Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Grid Live Encore. I'm Ben Schneider, in for Joe Samaniego today. With me is Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish, alongside Adam Lemeries, Joshua Birch, and welcome again to the newest member of the Grid Live team, Matthew Bro. Good to see all of you, and we want to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters, Colin Deschelle, Mark, and Robin. Your support allows us to continue to be on the air throughout 2022 and into the future, and continues to allow us to do what we love here, covering all these great racing series for our viewers. We're going to start off with a recap of the Formula One Belgian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen did it once again, coming through to take a decisive victory from 14th on the grid in what was a 1-2 finish for Red Bull Racing, with his teammate Sergio Perez following in second. It was Verstappen's 9th win of the season through 14 races. He now holds a staggering 93-point lead over Perez with 8 races remaining. Charles Leclerc is third in his Ferrari, 98 points behind. So, Kobe, Josh, I guess we'll start with you on this one. We talked about the lead Verstappen had going into the summer break. Now he's only extended even further on a weekend where many were predicting he might fall back a little bit because of how deep he was starting in the grid with the penalties. Does he have a championship locked up at this point with 8 races to go?
I think he absolutely does as well. And to be honest with you, I think he's had this one done since maybe even the French Grand Prix, maybe a bit before that as well. He has been so consistent this season as well. Ever since he stopped having these random engine failures that completely weren't his fault. If you think about it, Verstappen hasn't made any errors this year, whereas Leclerc has made errors at the French Grand Prix. He's had 2 retirements as well. And Ferrari's strategy just keeps absolutely throwing him away. I mean, it's just bad luck after bad luck after bad luck. And to be fair, Verstappen has been absolutely faultless this year. He really has come in and sort of said to people as well, okay, so last year you said that I didn't deserve the championship. I didn't deserve to be world champion. I'll come back in 2022 and I'll show you exactly who means business as well. He is in a dominant form. He's reminding me of Hamilton. He's reminding me of Verstappen. And mainly as well, he's reminding me of Schumacher. Unbelievable.
Yes, it's certainly been an unbelievable season for Max Verstappen. I think he absolutely has one hand on the championship at this point, unless he has some type of unbelievable epic collapse and Ferrari fixes all their issues and Charles Leclerc go out there and wins race after race after race, then I don't really see this result happen. I think Verstappen is certainly going to lock up the championship early, and he's going to become a 2-time Formula One world champion. So I think Red Bull and Verstappen, they can just really coast to the finish here.
I would tend to agree with both of you. I think Verstappen's lead is pretty much insurmountable at this point. It's not quite 4 full races, especially when you factor in now we give points for the fastest lap, and we still have 1 sprint race round to go as well. So there are some opportunities for some bonus points, if you will, for Ferrari to capitalize on. But if Ferrari continue to act how they've acted this season, I think it's hard for people to see them doing that. And we'll get to Ferrari's race here right now. Another race weekend and another questionable call from the Ferrari pit box. Ferrari brought Leclerc into the pits from P5 to go for the fastest lap with a couple of laps to go. Leclerc briefly got overtaken by Fernando Alonso before getting him back, but was given a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So instead of gaining an extra point, Ferrari cost their driver 2 points, and the team is only 41 points ahead from Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. So Kobe, we'll go to you first on this one. Is it time for Ferrari to make wide sweeping changes given how many points they've lost due to errors like this?
To be honest with you, Ben, I'm really scratching my head right now because Ferrari had the entire summer break to make changes, and right before Formula One returned to action, I read an article on Motorsport.com saying that Ferrari planned to change nothing, like nothing at all. And I just don't get it. If you see something not working one time, it's like, okay, we'll give you another chance. A second time, maybe we'll consider changes. A third time, a fourth time, a fifth time, and the same thing keeps happening over and over again, the same mistakes, and they still haven't learned their lesson at all. I think the team principal could certainly be on the hot seat here. He's arguably been on the hot seat for a very long time now, and I think changes, that sometimes they really need to start at the top, and I have a feeling that at some point Ferrari's going to get very frustrated, and they're going to make a change at the top, and others as well, because Ferrari in its current form right now is totally unacceptable.
We were talking about it in the watch along as well, as I've added a light so you can see me a bit more clearly. We were talking about it in the watch along commentary as well. As soon as the race sort of died down a little bit as well, Ferrari strategy became the factor. They were constantly arguing as well with Carlos Sainz over the radio, saying, avoid the bump coming into turn 5 at the Le Combe chicane, avoid the bump coming through Blanchimont, avoid the bump coming through Eau Rouge. I mean, as Carlos Sainz is a racing driver, he's won Grand Prix now. He has fantastic pace. He's in a Ferrari. He does not need to be told by the mechanics on the radio as well, and the strategists and engineers where to avoid the bumps. He knows where those bumps are. If it was a problem that he had to stop the car from failing as well, as we were thinking was the worry, then he should have just said, avoid these bumps, please. We've got a problem with the car. But he didn't. He was like he was a third driver almost as well, just talking to Sainz over the radio. It was abysmal. And then on the last lap, deciding for Leclerc to come in as well, losing a position to Alonso, gaining it back, yes, but they were going for the fastest lap. That didn't happen. And then getting a 5-second time penalty as well for speeding just 1 mile per hour over the pit lane speed limit as well is shocking. And I heard on the radio as well, Leclerc saying, I personally won't risk it. I don't want to risk it, but it's up to you. 20 seconds later, okay, so box now. I mean, who is running the Ferrari strategy department? They are a bunch of clowns. The meme has been circulating now for well over 2 months. I am ashamed. I am shocked. And Ferrari, I think today has been their worst performance. They had a complete open goal. Yes, Leclerc took the penalty, but he was fighting back. But Max Verstappen started 14th on the grid. By lap 12, he had passed Sainz and was in the lead. What are Ferrari playing at? I said it in the commentary, and I'll say it again. If this happens in Monza in 2 weeks' time from now, the third race of this triple header, I think the Tifosi will carry Matteo Binotto to the nearest cliff and throw him over the edge. They'll be done with him. They'll be done. No team boss has lasted this long where they've made so many mistakes in Ferrari. I am so surprised Matteo Binotto is still there. It is rotten to the core, Ferrari, absolutely rotten, and it needs a whole new digging up and a whole new route in order to fix this problem. They will never be world champions as long as this rot is still there. It is shocking and it is embarrassing. They've spent the last 3 years working towards these regulations. They've had arguably the best car on the grid, and Red Bull have come through and they've absolutely made them look fools. I am more done than I've ever been with Ferrari than I am right now. Shocking behavior, shocking.
And of course, the last time Ferrari won any sort of championship in Formula One was 2008. They haven't won a driver's championship since 2007, and it does look like that stretch is going to continue into 2023. It's so unfortunate because they had a car that looked like at the start of this season could take the fight to Red Bull, and with Mercedes for the first time in over half a decade not having that car, this was a golden opportunity for them to set forward and for Charles Leclerc to come through and win his first of what many think could be multiple world championships. But if he wants to win multiple world championships, he might have to do it with somebody else, because Ferrari, like you said, Josh, have just been totally incompetent on the pit box for a long time now. I think that meme's been circulating longer than 2 months. Feels like it's been, multiple years that we've been seeing that meme on Twitter and on Instagram and all over the place. It's just been so unfortunate. I feel bad for Leclerc and Sainz, who have not been perfect by any means themselves, but it's certainly not just them either. And when you look at the gap between Verstappen and Sainz or excuse me, Verstappen and Leclerc, or Red Bull and Ferrari, depending on which championship you're looking at. You have to wonder, is Verstappen just that good, or are Ferrari just that bad? Now, when it's that lopsided, I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, Verstappen coming from 14th on the grid, he's got to pass a lot more than just a couple of red cars to pull off an incredible drive like that to get to the lead so quickly. So I do think Verstappen and Red Bull have been, the class of the field this season. But Ferrari should be a lot closer than they are. It's a total embarrassment that they're that far back, and hopefully that we can see Kobe, like you were mentioning, some sweeping changes here, because I was just as surprised as you were that they came out and said going into the summer break that everything was fine, that were going to be no changes whatsoever. I don't know who is making that call, who has the power to make those changes, but they clearly are not watching the same race as we are, because if they were, I think it would be abundantly clear by now that whatever they have going for them right now is not working, and something desperately has to change. So it was a very disappointing day for Leclerc and for Ferrari in general. Another driver whose day ended in disappointment would have to be Sir Lewis Hamilton. We talked about Mercedes maybe being able to take the fight to Red Bull and Ferrari coming out of the summer break. That's going to have to wait at least one more week now, because Hamilton's Mercedes, despite the fact that it started on the second row alongside Alonso's Alpine, Hamilton tried to make a move on the outside of Alonso on lap 1. The two made contact. Hamilton's race ended on the opening lap. Now, Hamilton would apologize and accept blame for the incident. His teammate George Russell ended up just off of the podium in 4th. Josh, I'll go to you first. After this race weekend, are you less confident in Mercedes' ability to win a race before the end of the season?
I must admit I am. This has been an open goal, I think, for Mercedes. I said it for Ferrari, but for Mercedes too. I mean, they had Verstappen starting back on the grid in 14th and Leclerc started 15th, and it was a good opportunity for them to get up there. Hamilton risked it all on the opening lap, and I think Lewis is a little bit rusty in that regard. He's forgotten how to race. Fernando Alonso's team radio call was perfectly valid, in my opinion, as well, because Lewis Hamilton, in greatest respect, he only knows how to finish first, and he doesn't know how to race wheel to wheel. He hasn't done it for a long time. We saw last year when he was racing with Verstappen as well. It took him a while. He himself admitted, I'm a bit rusty in these areas as well, with these new, young, faster kids, he said as well. But Alonso's an old head, and he did not deserve what happened today. And Hamilton made that error, and he's admitted it. But I think there's only 3 races now on the calendar remaining where I think Mercedes can take a win. That's in Monza coming up. I think that's always an unpredictable race, and Mercedes have had some good luck there in the past as well. And it's a track where Ferrari usually self-destruct, and Red Bull have not had good luck there in the past couple of years as well. So they could go well there. Shortest race of the year in terms of time as well. The second, Singapore, car killer. Mercedes still proving reliable. Before today, Hamilton had finished every single lap of the season. He was the only driver to do so. So Singapore is a reliability thing, and it's difficult to pass there. So could get it there. And the third one, of course, Suzuka, a track which is historically hard to overtake at as well. So should be good. And maybe throw in a fourth there, Sao Paulo, because Lewis is so popular and he loves the circuit. So there's chances for Mercedes to win, but I'm honestly starting to consider that this could be the first season ever that Lewis Hamilton doesn't win a Grand Prix. And that is a scary thing to think. The regulations were brought in to make the series a lot more closer. If anything, it's driven more diversity into it as well. I mean, it's all over the place now. It's all over.
Yeah, Josh, it's totally all over the place. I'm going to be quite impressed if Lewis Hamilton doesn't win a race this year. I know before we entered the summer break, we were thinking Mercedes is looking good. They're going to be able to carry this momentum into the second half of the season. But come to Spa, and we're like, what in the world happened to Mercedes over the break? Because we thought they were going to potentially be on the outside looking in. And right now, it looks like Mercedes is going to need a lot of help if they want to win a race this year with either Lewis Hamilton or George Russell, because right now the car doesn't really have the pace. Lewis is having a really tough time with the car, as you were mentioning, Josh. It seemed like he's forgotten, how to actually race back there rather than getting out to the big lead, and been able to protect that and just having one of the best cars out there, and he's arguably in one of the worst cars, if not the worst car of his racing career right now. And just today, seeing Lewis make that mistake on trying to go around the outside of Fernando Alonso and end up retiring from the race, just seeing Lewis Hamilton retire from a race from contact, that's something you really don't see often. And I was reading some comments from Mercedes throughout the weekend. I see Hamilton was saying, he's ready to, basically bend this 2022 Mercedes car and get ready for 2023, because if he keeps having weekends like he had in Spa, it's certainly going to be a really long rest of 2022 for Lewis and
Yeah,
Mercedes.
yeah, he's taking a leap of faith.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining us here for the F1 part of the show. We'll see you on my show tomorrow on the Encore show to talk F2, which was back this weekend, as well as a few other things. But before we let you go, I want to hear from you. What is your one shining moment out of everything you covered on this motorsports weekend?
Two first-time winners in Formula 2 was quite good, so I'll save those tomorrow for our Encore show. And I do encourage everyone to tune in because there's a lot to talk about as well. I think the main thing is British Touring Cars had a quite quiet day, actually, so there's no highlight there. I want to say, by the way, there was a nasty crash in the Ginetta GT4s, actually, with a lengthy red flag period as well. And I understand the drivers there are still in a stable condition, which is great to hear. And I'll bring any news I hear about them in the Encore show tomorrow, because right now we're not going to hear anything until tomorrow anyway. But the last thing we heard was they're in a stable condition as well after a nasty accident with the cars coming together and sort of going into the Anchor barrier at high speed and one of the cars flipping over as well. So we hope they're okay. And my one shining moment, I think it's going to have to actually go to Alexander Albon, who did a fantastic P6 in qualifying and finished 10th in the race today, getting some vital points as Nicholas Latifi once again proving that he's a worthless F1 driver by spinning off the track and causing contact with Valtteri Bottas. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I found it a bit funny. It was Will FP1, who is a YouTuber as well, who does all those videos. He said Nicholas Latifi proving why Williams would keep him around as well, but he also said that Nicholas Latifi is about as useful as landing gear on a Japanese World War II fighter pilot plane. And I thought that was quite funny as well, because some of the moves he did today was a bit kamikaze as well. But I think, my one shining moment definitely goes to Alexander Albon. Great weekend, great qualifying, putting that Williams where we know it can be, and I think that is akin to show that Williams are definitely not just a flash in the pan. They're making progress, and so they should be. Get back up there soon.
Well, Josh, thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you on the Encore show tomorrow. For now, I know it's, for once, not quite midnight over there, so go ahead and get to bed a little bit earlier, get some rest, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Miracle I'm here, actually. I was supposed to be camping, but they lost the tent. So that it's worked out perfectly this evening, actually. But it's 11:19. This is weird. I'm going to get to bed before 1 a.m. on a Sunday night. I'll go and go and take a nice early night. And you guys have a great rest of the show. And I'll see you next week when we hit Zandvoort. And of course, our home race, Portland, coming up as well. Looking forward to that.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. We'll see you next time. And next, we're going to talk about the really crazy Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona International Speedway. And it was originally scheduled to take place last night, but rain postponed the race start until this morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The race got started, completed the first two stages, and went deep into the final stage with about 20 laps to go. It started raining in turn one, and when the pack was going through there at full speed, the wet track caused a huge multi-car wreck that took out most of the field. We'll get more into this controversy in a little bit, but the lightning in the area and the heavy rain led to a lengthy weather delay. But NASCAR stuck with it, got the track dried, and restarted the race with a few laps to go. Austin Dillon was running in second, got a big run, and took the lead by getting Austin centered sideways, almost spinning him out. A playoff berth on the line. His Richard Childress racing teammate Tyler Reddick was behind, pushing and defending the other competitors to ensure that Dillon won the race. And it was mission successful, an RCR 1-2 finish with both cars making the playoffs. Since it was announced that Reddick was leaving for 2311 racing in 2024, Richard Childress hasn't shied away from showing his displeasure with Reddick for choosing to leave RCR after the completion of the 2023 season. Starting with you, Matthew, after staying loyal to Austin Dillon in the draft, getting him into the playoffs, and not trying to selfishly win the race himself, should the commitment to his teammate calm some of the hurt feelings over RCR over Reddick's future departure?
I mean, I think absolutely, right? I mean, Reddick's done a lot for RCR. You have 2 Cup wins this season. You have an Xfinity Series championship. and then you push Richard Childress's grandson to victory. Like, I think I saw on Twitter, Reddick said that he didn't, as soon as he got behind Dillon, he said he wasn't going to try to win that race. He was going to get his teammate into the playoffs. As someone who supports 2311, it is nice to see Reddick go, but I don't think Richard Childress should have hard feelings after this. Clearly, Austin Dillon's going to finish around 19th in the regular season points, not including the win. So I don't think there should be any hard feelings at all, and I don't understand why anyone would have hard feelings. I mean, he's leaving for a team that might be on the rise. Unfortunately, none of the cars made the playoffs for 2311, but he's done a lot for you. So I think it's very awesome that Tyler Reddick proved that he is a loyal teammate that would push Austin Dillon to victory, even if him and the owner of the team aren't seeing eye to eye, as I should say.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matthew. Richard Childress can, shouldn't be sad right now because he can say he has both of his cars in the playoffs. No one expected Austin Dillon to win today, but he won. And that should give RCR some momentum going for the rest of the season and into next season, because Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick are going to be teammates. So there shouldn't be any hurt feelings right now. Both drivers are in the playoffs, and they got some momentum going forward as we start the playoffs next weekend in the legendary Southern 500 at Darlington.
Yeah, Adam, I agree with both you and Matthew. I don't think there should be any hurt feelings whatsoever right now, because Tyler Reddick showed Richard Childress, although I made a business decision to leave for another team, I'm still 110% committed to you and until the final race in 2023. And I think Tyler Reddick really showed Richard Childress that he's going to be all in moving forward. And they'll be able to put their differences aside and keep moving forward to try to win more NASCAR Cup Series races and compete for a championship this year and next year as well. So that was really a truly unselfish move by Tyler Reddick. He could have tried to win another race himself to add some more playoff points, but he decided it was the best thing for the organization to stick with his teammate, to block for him, and do whatever it took to make sure that Austin Dillon won that race. So that's definitely a wonderful teammate story right there. And now looking at the biggest controversy after the race, the big one with about 20 laps to go, lots of drivers were upset because they felt like NASCAR should have thrown the caution before it started raining hard enough to wreck the field. Denny Hamlin was one of the most vocal, saying that we really needed better officiating. And to put into perspective how bad the situation was, NBC Sports even had NASCAR Senior Vice President Competition Scott Miller up in the booth explaining that there wasn't really anything NASCAR could have done differently to prevent this from happening. NASCAR had people watching the radar, but they obviously couldn't predict when it was going to rain. This incident reminded some of what happened last year at Loudon when it started raining while they were racing, which caused the likes of Kyle Busch to spin and tear up his car. Today, a lot of torn up cars and unhappy people in the NASCAR Cup Series garage. Ben, do you agree with Scott Miller's assessment that NASCAR couldn't have done anything differently, or should they have considered a more conservative approach?
Well, I thought now's as good a week as ever to bring this back out here based on what happened today. So I don't know if Matt's going to get the reference here, but I've brought this out a couple of times whenever something controversial like this happens. And we just kind of go with those mottos and that kind of slogan there, because this is, I guess, an entertainment aspect of it as well. But what happened today, in my opinion, I would be a little bit more, willing to believe what Scott Miller had to say here if we didn't have something that surfaced on Twitter. And what I'm talking about is some fan shared a video that came from the front stretch grandstands as the cars were on the back stretch. So about 3/4 of a lap before the incident happened. And it was clearly raining. It wasn't just the fans saying that it was raining. You could tell from the camera that, drizzle was coming down. And the cars were still on the backstretch going into turn 3 as this was happening. So from my estimate, if that's the case, the rain was probably moving in very lightly on the front stretch and in turns 1 and 2 at that point. So we have that video evidence from, some amateur footage from the fans in the stands here. why on earth would NASCAR, knowing that these cars, obviously based on the laws of physics, cannot run in the rain on 31 degrees of banking at Daytona, why would they not throw the caution out, expecting that maybe this is just a pop-up shower, and maybe if we keep the cars running under caution, we can restart the race and, just have it be, one of those phantom yellows? I think is a better scenario than what we got, versus letting them run green as long as they absolutely could and into wet turns 1 and 2. And then we obviously saw the end result there. So I think there was an opportunity here today for NASCAR to be a little bit more cautious and throw a caution and prevent what was Justin Marks' estimate there, $4 million worth of damage. It's very, very unfortunate what happened for a lot of these teams. Now, it did give the smaller teams like Live Fast and Rick Ware and Beard Oil Motorsports an opportunity to shine and get top 10 finishes, which is great. But for the teams that we usually see running up at the front, and especially considering the implications of this being a playoff race, I really think NASCAR dropped the ball on this one. They should have been a little bit more assertive to get on the caution lights and prevent such an incident from happening. Matthew, you want to go ahead here?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, you could see me all just shaking my head. It's just, as somebody who doesn't pay much attention to like Formula One, I hear a lot of people always say how the FIA is very inconsistent. But just watching NASCAR this year as a fan, the inconsistency is just, it's insane. It really is. They'll throw the caution flag when Ryan Blaney's 10 feet away from winning the All-Star race. They won't throw the caution flag when Kyle Busch Truex takes himself out at Loudon. And then there's rain. I was reading stuff on Twitter too. Justin Haley, the amount of F-bombs heard on Justin Haley's radio saying it's raining, it's raining. I'm just a little surprised though that nobody lifted. Like everyone saw the rain. The drivers knew it, the spotters knew it before they threw the caution, but yet nobody lifted. And then I think there was only 5 cars that were considered not in an incident out of the 37 that competed in the race today. Like that's an insane thing. So I mean, it is hard. You can't predict the weather. Even the weather people can't extremely predict the weather. But like I think Suarez also said something like NASCAR has it down to a T where they know what it's coming. Obviously, you'll see Bob Hocker share all the weather, the radar on Twitter. It's just an unfortunate circumstance that wiped out more than half the field at the end of the day. Going back to green, where there are only like 10 cars on the lead lap or something like that. It was crazy. And then I got to see the last 4 laps, and there was only 4 cars running up near front. Now the whole rest of the pack separated at the time I saw it. It was just crazy. I mean, as a fan, I don't know what to say with NASCAR's inconsistencies. They got to figure something out. The ratings aren't doing as terrible, but like I think a lot of people are starting to look at it and be like, really? But like you said, Ben, it's great for these cars that they still don't interview. Like Cody Ware finished 6th. Rick Ware had 2 top 10s. That's the first time in NASCAR Cup Series history that happened. Yet no attention for them. It's very unfortunate. BJ McCool finished 7th, I believe, too. Landon Castle finished 4th. Great day for those because of the rain. Great day for those guys, but it's like, as a fan, you want to be rewarded. I'm sorry for talking so long, but as a fan, you want to be rewarded seeing those guys finish in those positions. But at the same time, you see all those guys who had tremendous cars this entire race. This happens. And then all of a sudden, guys who you think are going to have a legitimate shot at the playoffs, Blaney, who would just had to have a nice day, he wrecked before, but then the rain everyone wrecked. So it was unfortunate. I think it was very inconsistent. Could you have done something different? Yeah, but that happened a few hours ago. So, I mean, there's nothing we can do about it now.
And Matt, to go back to your earlier point about not lifting, I think drivers probably, if they had known the situation that was coming, maybe some of the drivers at the back, and I think you did see some drivers at the back kind of drive their way through, namely the back markers that we usually see, running down in the 20s and 30s who got top 10s today, and that's great for them. But at the same time, the guys at the front of the pack, obviously, they know that the caution could come any minute, could potentially end the race. I don't necessarily expect us to be able to believe that they are going to lift in that situation. So that's, just an unfortunate part of something that comes with super speedway racing. You can't lift, even though lifting is the only way you're going to be able to preserve your car. It's just inevitable when a situation like that happens that you're going to get torn up. And I also agree with your point on the coverage. I was very disappointed that we didn't get more interviews, particularly during the rain delay with some of the smaller teams that were running up front. It's also unfortunate that we're racing in Florida in late August, where it rains pretty much every day. We have to deal with these issues on the regular here, and ending up having the race at 10 a.m. on a news and business channel, literally the consumer news and business channel, CNBC. It's very frustrating that, I even saw ESPN's own Marty Smith was asking, what channel's the race on? I can't find it. I mean, you don't expect the playoff cutoff race for NASCAR, what's supposed to be one of the biggest event of the regular season, probably outside of Daytona 500 or any of the crown jewels, and it's on a business channel at 10 a.m. Now, I know NBC shut down NBCSN. They had schedule conflicts with USA. There was nothing really they could do, but it's just an unfortunate situation that, look, I know you can't predict the weather, but you're less likely to have that if you're not racing in Florida in late August, where it rains all the time. So, there's a lot for NASCAR to improve on here, and I think the coverage is certainly one of those things. Race control, another one of those things as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe NASCAR should have listened to Chase Elliott and went to Bristol instead, because looking at the radar last night, it wasn't raining in Bristol at all. And I don't know about you guys, but I think running the Bristol night race as the final race before the playoffs, I think that would be really exciting. Short track beating and banging, tempers flaring. I think that just get back to the roots of old school NASCAR that we all know and love, and getting back to NASCAR not throwing the caution in time before it rained. And you think, considering this type of racing, you're on a super speedway, you're running 190 to 200 miles per hour on a tight pack. This is the last type of track where you need something like that to happen, and that because somebody could really get hurt, and it actually is a good way to move into this next point I'm about to make. As I said a little while ago, Denny Hamlin was very vocal, and something else he mentioned was the hard hit he suffered in that big crash. Hamlin said his competitors have told him how harder the hits are in this new Cup car compared to the Gen 6, but today was the first time he got to experience it for himself. He compared the hit that he took in the wreck to getting punched in the face by a boxer and said that his whole body hurt. This adds to the growing number of drivers who've spoken up about this issue with the new car. Hamlin's own 2311 racing drivers, Kurt Busch, backed it hard into the wall at Pocono, and he's still recovering from a concussion. And this is a real good question for you, Ben. Does it become even more concerning that more drivers keep coming forward about the harder hits? And do you fear something could terribly go wrong one of these days if this is like an issue that cannot be addressed?
Yeah, Kobe, I'm very concerned. I'm extremely concerned, I have to say. And I'm very thankful and pleasantly surprised that, as far as we know, Kurt Busch and his concussion issue is the only major injury that has come out of his next-gen car so far. And it's becoming eerie. How many times we see drivers and hear drivers get out of these cars and say, man, that was a harder hit than I was expecting, or that was, a harder shock to my system than I would have gotten had the same wreck happened in a Gen 6 car or in a Xfinity car or a truck, or, something along those lines, where they talk about how they're taking these hard hits. I think Bubba Wallace even said after Atlanta, I'm not so sure how many of these I can take. His teammate Kurt Busch should be in the playoffs right now. We did get our 16 winners, by the way, so I will eat crow on that one, only kind of, because we only have 15 winners in the playoffs, and Blaney, thank goodness, was still able to get in on points with the season that he's having. But Kurt Busch, point being, he's not going to be able to compete for a championship when he earned his way into the postseason this year. That's very, very unfortunate. I'm glad that he's taking a step back for his health, and hopefully we will see him on the track again soon. But I just fear that, you keep hearing about these things. It's going to become inevitable at some point, especially at a track like Daytona, and we have Talladega coming up in the playoffs as well, that are known for these hard hits at speeds approaching 200 miles an hour. One of these days, if what these drivers are saying is true, it's reasonable to assume that one of them is going to take a hit hard enough that it results in an actual injury that may cause them to miss time on the track, or even worse. I mean, we just don't know. So I have praised the next-gen car in terms of how it races, but I don't think that it has been the panacea, as Steve Phelps said, that this is going to fix all of our problems with the sport. Everything that is still ailing NASCAR, this is going to fix it, because clearly NASCAR, has not lost a driver in their top 3 series since Dale Earnhardt 21 years ago. And we hope and pray that Earnhardt remains the last one forever. But it's just, it feels like almost tempting fate. I think Josh said that on one of our shows earlier this season. You keep hearing these things, and so many times in the history of this sport, it has taken a driver getting hurt or getting killed to make the changes necessary to prevent that from happening again. And you think of the halo and the aero screen in open wheel racing. It took the deaths, unfortunately, of Jules Bianchi and Justin Wilson to implement that technology and get that streamlined so that we have it on Indy cars and Formula One cars and all open wheel cars nowadays. And, who knows how many injuries and lives those have saved at this point. But they should have been on the cars sooner than they were. And if they had been on the cars, we might still have Justin Wilson around and racing. We might still have Jules Bianchi running in a Ferrari competing against Charles Leclerc in Formula One. It's so unfortunate that it took those awful circumstances for us to actually do something about it and get these safety measures put into place. So I would hope that NASCAR knows better by now. They're listening to the feedback of the drivers. They're listening to these comments after they get involved in these wrecks. They can go back to the drawing board once the season is over, try to look at improvements to make to the car for 2023, and hopefully get all this sorted out.
Yeah, we definitely hope that NASCAR is able to sort all of that out, because it's definitely getting more eerie each time we hear a driver come forward and share their experience of what it was like to take a hard hit in the car. And with the Gen 6 car, you really didn't hear that often. I don't even know if I even heard that once from a driver with the Gen 6 car, of like how hard the hit was after walking away from the incident. But Denny Hamlin is like driver number. I'm not sure how many drivers have come forward, because it's a growing list. It seems like every other week of drivers who are concerned about these hard hits to the cars. And I don't know, since I'm not an engineer, I don't know for sure if NASCAR can make changes to the next gen car to make it a lot safer. But if they can, I'm sure they'll probably be looking into that this off season, because it really shook me a little bit hearing Denny Hamlin's description of what that accident at Daytona was like. Being punched in the face by a boxer. That must have been one heck of a lick that he took if he said it felt like he got punched by a boxer. And we hope that something bad doesn't happen in the future, considering all of these hits. But and the next super speedway race is going to be Talladega coming up in the playoffs, and that'll certainly be a big concern when we get to that race. And we ended the regular season, like you said, Ben, with 16 different winners, but with Kurt Busch forfeiting his playoff spot, only 15 race winners are in the postseason, meaning only one driver made it in on points. Earlier in the race, Ryan Blaney got caught up in a wreck and suffered damage. The car didn't have the pace anymore, so he just had to log laps and hope things fell his way. Despite Martin Truex Jr. picking up important stage points and outscoring Blaney, damage to the number 19 Toyota really hurt him in the draft at the end, as others went by him late, putting an end to his playoff hopes this year. Truex ended up missing the postseason by 3 points, with Blaney taking the final playoff spot. Matthew, was today a lot tougher for Blaney than you imagine? And does Truex missing the playoffs expose just another flaw in the current system, because he was sixth in points?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Ryan Blaney probably thought to himself he just had to finish the race. And then Truex had a pretty great race, too. I think, now that Austin Dillon's the official winner, I think if you look at the standings, Blaney will finish third, just 3 points ahead of Truex, who finished fourth. So Truex becomes the highest overall finisher in regular season to not make the playoffs. And I think that absolutely exposes something. I think NASCAR should implement something where, like, when they first developed this, I always thought that the winner of the regular season should get a bye at least until the round of 8. I always thought that was just some silly thing I threw out. But I think if you're like top 5 in points and you don't make it, and yes, you could say, well, they didn't win. Yeah, but he also had a bunch of more top 10s and top 5s than Austin Dillon and literally everyone else behind him. I think if you make the top 5, I feel like there should be something where you should at least be guaranteed kind of like the win in. Because it's unfortunate. You have cars like the 45 technically is still in the owner's playoffs in terms of. So the 45 makes the playoff. The 19 and the 12 doesn't. So Ryan Blaney, who finishes third, does not make it because there were 16 different winners. So you have the teams who are third and fourth in owner's points get bumped down to 17th and 18th because of this rule, you're winning, you're in. And there's a lot of cars who have been like Alex Bowman, very inconsistent. I don't see him going past the round of 12. I don't see Austin Dillon making it past the round of 12. But knowing now we're saying this, so Bowman will make the Final Four somehow. That's what happens when we do these things week in and week out. It's a very inconsistent system. I like it because I like to see certain drivers be able to get that shot. And I like the idea of Daytona because literally anyone can win it. I mean, Cody Ware, he wouldn't have been eligible, but he was 6th today. That would have been pretty awesome. So Blaney is lucky. I think today's word is inconsistent and luck, the 2 words. Inconsistent because NASCAR likes to do certain things with their system, whatever, and just luck because a lot of guys got very lucky today and just did not have to spend $4 million combined like what Justin Marks said. But to answer your question, yeah, I think it sucks for Truex. It sucks for Toyota. But I wonder, a funny thing would be, I saw it on Twitter. I know this would never happen. But if you're competing for the owners' playoffs, wouldn't it be funny if the 19 and 45 switched? So Truex would run the 45. I know it would never happen. Obviously, Gibbs would love his grandson in the 19, don't get me wrong. But sponsors and real life scenarios are what's keeping us from that. But yeah, sorry for that long answer, Kobe and Ben, but that's how I feel inconsistent and lucky was today's race.
And that's a great point that you bring up. Maybe the 45 and 19 making a driver swap based on what's going on in the owners' playoffs right now. That would be a very interesting scenario to try to give the 45 put a more experienced Cup champion in that car to compete for an owners' championship. And imagine Ryan Blaney winning the championship this year. If Blaney wins the championship, we're guaranteed to have a split drivers and owners championship. I can think about it happening a couple of times in trucks and Xfinity. I can't remember the last time we would have had that in the Cup Series. So that could be a very interesting scenario to keep your eye on, especially if Blaney goes on a Tony Stewart-esque 2011 Cup Series title run here, not winning a race in the regular season, then winning 5 or whatever it was in the postseason. That could be something to watch as well. But I think it really exposes a flaw in the system. And people that watch this channel, people that watch my channel, they know that I don't need to explain how I feel about the playoff system. But I think my bigger issue is not that for a while it looked like, and if the race had ended under the rain delay, it would have resulted in this. Ryan Blaney could finish as high as top 5 in points, enter the final race of the regular season 3rd in points, and not have a shot for the championship. That's not even my biggest issue. My biggest issue is that Ryan Blaney, who's had a season that has him somewhere between 3rd and 6th in points, could be locked out of the top 16 and end up with, at best, a 17th place ranking in the final standings. That's more my problem, because the final ranking in the standings, in my opinion, should be something that is somewhat indicative of the season that you've had. If you're 10th in points, you should roughly have had the 10th best average finisher. So I know it's not going to be an exact number because of stages and bonus points and things like that, but it should be a rough indication of how your season went. And Ryan Blaney, say what you will about him having 25 chances or 26 chances to win a race or whatever to get his way into the playoffs. You cannot deny that he deserves to be higher than 17th in the points right now based on the season that he's had. And Truex is the same way, because they were neck and neck for a while there, all the way up to the checkered flag today. They've both had seasons that are better than 17th, and yet that's where Truex is going to be locked in right now. And that's where the 12 team in the Owners' Championship is going to be locked in, despite the fact that they've had better seasons than that statistically, because they have a goose egg in the win column, even though they've done everything but win a race. Ryan Blaney actually did win a race. It just doesn't count because it's the All-Star exhibition race. They're locked out of that top 16. And I think that's incredibly, incredibly unfortunate for not just Truex, but also for the Owners' Championship on the side of a 12 team, that they're locked out of that spot. So it's not just a matter of they can't compete for a championship, or they would not have been able to compete for a championship because they didn't win a race. It comes down to the rankings as well. There's more to the final point season standings than just the guy in P1. There's bonuses and incentives with sponsors and deals and everything like that. And now Truex is the best he's going to finish the 17th. I just have a massive, massive problem with that. And I don't know if the points would have swung enough in Corey LaJoie's favor, but Corey LaJoie could have easily won Atlanta. Now, the battle for him to get in the top 30 would have been very, very interesting. It would have been reminiscent of Chris Buescher in 2016 after he kind of stole one at Pocono there. But, imagine a scenario where Corey LaJoie gets into the playoffs being 30th in points, but Ryan Blaney, 3rd in points, does not get into the postseason. If you like the postseason, if you like the playoffs, if you like the fact that the championship comes down to the final race, I respect your opinion. I get that. I get that there's an entertainment aspect of this sport as well. But I just have a very hard time seeing the legitimacy in letting, and again, no disrespect to Corey LaJoie Inspire. They're doing the best with what they can. They don't have the funding of a Penske or a top team like that. But where's the legitimacy in them taking a playoff spot away from a guy who, when you tally up the points, is in the top 5? That's what I struggle with. That's what I don't understand. And Kobe, to bring it all back, I think it absolutely exposes a flaw in the system.
Yeah, and I know I said it yesterday, but when you're looking at the season that Martin Truex Jr. has had, he hasn't had a terrible season at all. Still in the top 10 in points overall, but just the fact that he didn't win a race, this is going to be considered a season of failure for the number 19 team. It's really crazy that you can be in the top 5 in points for a lot and just slip back into the top 10. and your season can be considered a failure just because of the fact you didn't win a race. And if you think back to the very beginning of the season, Martin Truex Jr. was actually one caution away from winning at Las Vegas. He was up there battling, I believe it was Kyle Busch for the win before that caution came out. Then Alex Bowman stole one from him right there. So Martin Truex Jr. could have easily made it into the playoffs. And if it wasn't for that caution, I wonder if we'd probably be having an entirely different conversation right now. It's unfortunate this happened for Truex because the performance his team has shown this year is certainly a lot better than 17th place, and unfortunately that's what it's going to show in the record book for him this year. And a quick follow up for everyone, going to bring Adam back. Going to bring Adam back in here for this one. With the regular season in the books, which drivers do you expect to start off the playoffs strong, and who could be in trouble?
Well, Kobe, Matt, Josh, Kobe, Matt, and Ben, you gotta look at Chase Elliott, regular season champ. He has the most wins so far this year. So you gotta say he is an early favorite to be in Phoenix to contend for a championship. Ross Chastain at Trackhouse Racing. We have one more road course on the schedule. That is the Charlotte Roval. Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin has won at Darlington. So, and we have a couple more short tracks left on the schedule. Bristol and Martinsville. Denny Hamlin's really good on short tracks. And drivers who I don't think are going to do so good. You brought up Austin Dillon. I don't see him advancing at all, past the first stage. Surprisingly, I don't think the defending NASCAR Cup Series champion Kyle Larson is going to have a good playoff. So only one win this year at Auto Club Speedway. I don't know if it's this new right? I don't know if it's this new next gen car, but Carlson has 2 wins this year. The second one was at Watkins Glen. So, I don't think Kyle Larson advances past the first stage either.
So I went ahead and put a list together of my first 4 out after the conclusion of this race, and I came across something that was kind of unbelievable to me that I had to go ahead and fact check. People that have been following Hendrick's season, we've seen that Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott have been running strong. Elliott obviously ran away with the regular season championship. We've kind of seen Alex Bowman and William Byron take a bit of a step back here. Do you know how many top 10s William Byron has since he won Martinsville in April? Just 1. That is indicative to me of a massive fall off from where Byron was at the start of the season, when all the Hendrick teammates looked like they were running on all cylinders. All the Hendrick teammates looked like they could potentially lock out the top 4. You're not going to lock out the top 4 if you have 1 top 10 in, what is it now, the last 4 months? So Byron, to me, is in deep trouble. I would be very surprised. Now, I don't doubt that Hendrick could turn it around, but if he runs how he's been running, it's going to be very difficult for me to see him getting out of the first round. And then my other 3 out, Austin Dillon, as much as I think RCR has taken a step forward this year, I do think he's still the weaker of the RCR teams this year. I think, only having 1 win to Reddick's 2, and the way Tyler Reddick's been running this season, I think he's a better bet to go ahead and make it into a round of 12. And then Chase Briscoe and Austin Cindric, still, younger drivers in the Cup Series, don't have a lot of experience. I think it could be a rough first playoffs for them as they, try to make their way out of a round of 16. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to do so. So that's my first 4 out. In terms of who I think could get in and, make a run in a round of 12 and beyond. Adam, you mentioned, Chase Elliott looks very, very strong. I think he's probably the early championship favorite. But, with how unpredictable this playoff system is, I think he's the only surefire bet. I think it's going to be, kind of a free-for-all here. We've seen the parity with how many winners we've gotten with this next-gen car. I think Chase Elliott is probably a lock to move on, but we're just going to have to wait and see how the rest of the season plays out in terms of who we think could be championship favorites when it comes down to the Final Four at Phoenix later this season.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you as well. I think my first 4 out would be the same, except I think Bowman would be out before Byron. But at the same time, I feel like Ryan Blaney is going to pull a Denny Hamlin and just start winning races, and I think Ryan Blaney makes the Final Four. I've said that from the start. I wish we would have this conversation with Martin Truex Jr. I mean, he had he's finished top 2 4 out of the last 5 playoffs, and he doesn't make it this year. Very unfortunate, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Blaney shifted into maybe a 6th gear, because they only got 5 now, but shifted into a 6th gear and really took off. I think Chase Elliott is probably going to win the championship. On my super late NASCAR account, I meant before he had the 4 wins, I was like, he's the most consistent driver. He's over 100 points ahead of everyone. Well, he was, and then the playoff system resets. I mean, just thinking about who's in the playoffs, it wouldn't surprise me if guys like, so you have the surefire picks, right? Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, you can say, because, I mean, he's a past champion too. But then you have guys like who are a little under the radar. I mean, Christopher Bell's had a absolutely phenomenal season. I mean, he was like 7th or 6th in points, ahead of Kyle Busch, technically now ahead of Truex. He finishes the regular season as the best driver at Joe Gibbs Racing. Yes, Christopher Bell was the best driver at Joe Gibbs Racing. So I wouldn't be surprised if he lit it up too. But I'm not counting out Ryan Blaney at all. But I am counting out Alex Bowman. I am counting out Austin Dillon, Chase Briscoe, and probably Austin Cindric. I hate to dish the really great Ford development drivers, but I don't think they're going anywhere. But watch out for Ryan Blaney. I think he pulls a Denny Hamlin. Remember, Denny Hamlin had that thing where was competing for the championship up until the second to last race last season with no wins. Comes into Darlington with, I believe that was the Darlington race, correct me if I'm wrong, where Kyle Larson kind of rode the wall and Denny Hamlin that was the first win for Hamlin last season. I think Ryan Blaney can definitely do it. I really do. It's going to be Chase Briscoe, or not Chase, I am so sorry, guys. I'm thinking of 4 guys too. So Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott, I think make the Final Four, but those are the only 2 I could tell you right now.
Yeah, I definitely think that the one driver who's probably the early favorite right now is Chase Elliott by far, and then Kyle Larson. We saw him get the victory at Watkins Glen, but he hasn't been as dominant, obviously, as he was during his championship seasons. So I'm not sure if we can call Larson, the overall favorite for the championship. So mine is Chase Elliott. I think the championship could actually be wide open this year. And we've seen Kevin Harvick build some momentum lately, and it was crazy because just several weeks ago, before Kevin Harvick got those two victories at Michigan and Richmond, we were wondering if Harvick was going to be on the outside looking in and miss the playoffs, and wondering if we're going to see the Kevin Harvick of old. But that number 4 team is peaking at the right time, and I'm wondering if we could see Harvick, try to make a deep playoff run, and I could see Blaney pulling things together with Team Penske and getting on a run here and making a deep playoff run despite barely making to the playoffs. And the point you're making, Ben, about half a Hendrick Motorsports seem like they're in trouble. Alex Bowman, William Byron, I have no idea what has happened to the 24 and the 48 teams, but they haven't been pulling their weight at all over at HMS, while mostly Elliott and then Larson some have been pulling the heavy lifting. But if I'm Alex Bowman, if I'm William Byron right now heading into playoffs, I'm a little nervous because the performance just hasn't been there for a while, and especially for much of the summer. And next, moving on, we're gonna discuss the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship Michelin GT Challenge Sprint Race at Virginia International Raceway, which saw the number 9 Pfaff Motorsports Porsche continue its winning ways. Matthew Jomine and Matt Campbell won for the 5th time this season in GTD Pro. All they have to do to win the GTD Pro title is to simply take the green flag and start the 10-hour Motul Petit Le Mans at Michelin Raceway, Road Atlanta, which takes place on October 1st. Jomine and Campbell have enjoyed a strong season in GTD Pro before they turn their attention to the factory Porsche LMDH program next season. Adam, with Pfaff set to clinch the championship, thanks to a great partnership between those 2 drivers, should Porsche try to keep the driver pairing together when they move up to prototype racing?
Oh, absolutely, Kobe. Why break up this this combination of Matt Campbell and Matthew Jomine. They've been so good this year in GTD Pro. I mean, if they were to somehow break up, it wouldn't be the same. If I'm Porsche, why I would keep them together in a prototype. Why break up this great combination? They've been really good all season. So if I'm Porsche, I keep them together. Why break up a good thing?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it would be a good idea for Porsche to split those two apart. There's also some driver pairings, that they just don't work out together, like we've seen over in the DPI ranks with Pippo Durrani and Tristan Nunez. And it's been a little bit better for Pippo Durrani and Olivier Pla, but it's still not quite there. Action Express is having a really down year, and we'll definitely be talking more about Express racing, that Wheeling Engineering Cadillac DPI in the future. And got a comment there from Michael Tiller saying that no need to break up a great combination. You agree with us saying to keep them together, and next season, Team Penske is going to be running the Porsche LMDH program, both the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship and the FIA World Endurance Championship. So whatever championship that Campbell and Jomine are in, I think it would be a smart decision by Porsche to keep them together. And I know Jomine and Campbell have said it's their preference to remain in IMSA next season. That's where they would rather be, rather than have to racing Europe. And we'll see what Porsche that decides. I know a lot of people were really upset when they broke up the Bam Thor driver pairing in GTLM when Lawrence Van Thor and Earl Bamber decided to go their separate ways. That driver pairing was a lot of fun. They played into the Bam Thor name. They had a lot of success together. But sometimes things just run its course and it's time for a change. But right now, I think Jomine and Campbell are firing on all cylinders together. And I think it would be a smart idea for Porsche to keep them together, whether they're racing for Team Penske overseas and in the U.S., or even if they decide to put them with one of their customer teams. Joda Sport's going to be running a customer Porsche, and same thing for JDC Miller Motorsports in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. So a lot of possibilities for Jomine and Campbell to continue working together. And speaking of clinching championships, that's exactly what happened with the GTD Sprint Cup title, the very last Sprint Cup title, because it's going away at the end of this year. Paul Miller Racing won that. A job well done by Brian Sellers and Madison Snow. In the race itself, Winwood Racing took the GTD win with Philip Ellis and Russell Ward, the second place finisher in GTD. Maxime Martin saved enough gas to make it to the finish, and he helped his co-driver Roman DeAngelis keep a 45-point lead in the championship with only one race remaining. And on the morning of October 1st, be sure to watch our special Grid Live pre-race show previewing this year's Motul Petit Le Mans, the final race of the DPI era before LMDH and LMH are introduced in the 2023 Rolex 24 Daytona with IMSA's new GTP category, a throwback name, a blast from the past.
That's absolutely right. That IMSA, back in the day, the IMSA GTP series was one of the best sports car championships going. And now it's time for our grid one shining moment from this crazy motorsports weekend. So I'll start with you, Ben. What's your grid one shining moment?
Well, I think it has to go to Austin Dillon. Every driver had an opportunity to come through and score a miraculous victory to get themselves into the Cup Series playoffs. In this last opportunity, this cutoff race here at Daytona, Austin Dillon did just that. And that number 3 Richard Childress Racing team is in the playoffs now. Richard Childress has both of his cars in the playoffs, which is absolutely huge for that organization, but has struggled to do such a thing the last few years. And also, of course, especially since I'm with Brock Beard and LastCar.info, have to give a call to all the teams that had top 10 runs today. Spire, Rick Ware, Live Fast, Beard Oil Motorsports, all the teams. I'm sure I'm probably forgetting one or two cars that were up there as well. Rick Ware had both of his cars in the top 10. Just a great run for all those teams to keep their cars clean and in one piece and to come home with a very solid finish, what is essentially a victory for each of those teams. Cody Ware in particular for his first top 10. It was very heartwarming to see all of that. If nothing else, that's the silver lining that comes out of these massive accidents, is that it does give the small teams an opportunity to come through, avoid those, and come home with career best finishes. So great job to all of them as well.
And before I get into my one shining moment, got a comment here from Michael Tiller. And to answer your question about a championship being retired, it's the GTD Sprint Cup that's been retired. So basically, the championship within a championship, that deals with all of the sprint races. The 2 hour 40 minutes or the 100-minute races at Belle Isle and Long Beach. Yeah. So the championship for the non-endurance races, that's what's been retired, as IMSA president John Dillon said. The market spoke for itself. Only had a few teams committed to the Sprint Cup, so it didn't really make any sense business-wise to keep it moving forward. So there will be no more GTD Sprint Cup after this year. Paul Miller Racing, Madison Snow, Brian Sellers are going to be the final IMSA GTD Sprint Cup champions. And Ben, to piggyback off of what you were saying about the underfunded teams, I think something we don't really talk about a lot was exposed today, since we didn't have a lot more cars running, is the engine disparity inside the NASCAR Cup Series garage. Because a lot of those smaller teams, yeah, they were able to keep up in the draft, but they weren't able to. They just didn't have the power under the hood to challenge Austin Dillon, Tyler Reddick, and all of those guys up there who were duking it out for the win. And that's certainly been an issue in NASCAR for quite a while, where they're not going to be getting the same motors that Stewart Haas Race and Team Penske are receiving, or Hendrick RCR, and it makes it a lot tougher. Yes, those smaller teams do have a chance to go out there and win at places like Daytona and Talladega, but it's certainly a lot tougher for them, given the engine disparity all throughout the garage. And appreciate that, Michael. And getting to my one shining moment, I got to give it to Jeremy Clements. I know the Xfinity race was really wacky, wild, insane. I know Ben's going to have a lot to say about that tomorrow on the Grid Live Encore show, but got to hand it to Jeremy Clements, that family-owned team, and it was really crazy. His only 2 wins ever in the NASCAR Xfinity Series happened on the same day, in 5 years apart, winning at Road America, and then he ended up winning at Daytona. I thought it was a real cool story to see Jeremy, his family, so excited to get a win. And he avoided all the carnage and got the job done. And one of the best things to come out of Super Speedway race, I know there's a lot of mixed opinions on it. A lot of people love it. Some people absolutely hate it and don't want anything to do with it. But one of the best things to come out of Daytona and Talladega are the feel-good stories, your underdog stories, kind of like all the underdogs we saw in the top 10 in the Cup race, and Jeremy Clements getting the win there. And now he's in the playoffs, making the Xfinity playoff picture. Really interesting.
It's tough for me. You both, Ben and Kobe, you both touched on it. I want to, since I haven't been on the show, can I quickly do a couple points? I think one of them definitely, I said definitely multiple times. I'm going to keep saying it, kind of like Noah Gragson in that rain delay about Xfinity Internet. But nonetheless, so I think back markers for both races too. I mean, and this is cool. The charter system, I think, is one of my stars. And the reason why is because since Landon Castle was 4th, Cody Ware was 6th, and BJ McClure was 7th, it is the first time since 2015, when the charter system was introduced, where all 36 charter entries finished in the top 10 in the regular season. So I thought that was pretty cool. Another one in terms of driving is, I think, David Reagan. I brought him up yesterday. He was my sleeper pick, finished 9th. He actually is a part of the All 40 Challenge. I don't know if you follow this on Twitter with Steve Lovender, but David Reagan has finally finished 9th in a Cup Series race. It only took him since 2006 and 476 career starts to finally finish in every position, 1 through 40. Finished 9th. I thought that was awesome. And the last thing I will mention is, it has to do with sports betting. Somebody bet $13.49 today on a parlay, a 4-leg parlay, for Cody Ware, BJ McClure, Landon Castle, and David Reagan to all finish in the top 10, and they won over $1 million. So whoever that person is, you are the star of the day for me, because congrats. You are going to be living in luxury because of the back markers getting it done.
And for me, my grid one shining moment has to go to the fans down there in Daytona. Think about it. The Xfinity race got over at nearly 1 a.m. The fans down there had to sit through lots of rain, thunder, lightning. They stuck around for today and saw an incredible Cup race. They had to sit through another 3-hour rain delay to get in there in Daytona. So give credit to all the fans that stuck around, for this racing in Daytona, having to deal with the crazy weather. So the fans at Daytona is my one shining moment.
And we have some comments from Michael Tiller in the chat room saying that your one shining moment has to be Max Verstappen coming from P14 to win the Belgian Grand Prix in P1 today. Truly a great drive from him. Yeah, that was certainly an awesome drive for Verstappen. He said, but you also feel bad for Lewis Hamilton. The way that he retired, it was hard to watch the way he and Alonso crashed past the Camel Straight, especially how angled he was. But I'm relieved that he's okay. Yeah, we're very happy that Lewis Hamilton was okay from that accident. It was always really scary when you see a car go up in the air like that and come back hard on the ground. And when that usually happens, I was concerned about some back issues, but Lewis seemed like he's all right. And he's gonna put this one behind him and get ready for Zandvoort to go racing in the Netherlands. And unfortunately, we're out of time for today. So please be sure to like and subscribe to Grid Network here on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We definitely encourage all of our viewers to take 5 minutes after our show and consider joining our Patreon page, Invest in Grid Network, to keep us on the air well into the future. We have a lot of big plans for the future. Click the link to buy me a coffee in the video description below, and you can buy a drink for your favorite on-air talent here at Grid Network. Also, as always, a special thank you to Edward Hunter from formerly Zone, Amber and Zachary for buying us one. We greatly appreciate it. Any amount will help us continue to grow on our motorsports media outlet. Visit public.com, also known as the stock market social media home. The link below and referral code GRIDnet gives you $5 to invest immediately. Public.com allows you to connect with your friends. You can make new friends and use tools to learn how to properly invest in the stock market. And looking at our schedule for the next few days, Monday night, Grid Live Encore with Ben, Josh, and Brandon Crossland covering the crazy Xfinity race at Daytona, ARCA Menard series at the Milwaukee Mile, including Formula 2 and Formula 3 at Spa. And then Wednesday, Adam and I will have the latest news in motorsports on a brand new episode of Grid Tonight. For Matthew Bro, Adam Lemeries, Ben Snyder, and Joshua Birch, I'm Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful week.
Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest and start investing and networking on public.com.